Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way up to 2023 and review them. And now we are on to a big one, in my opinion, Planet of the Daleks, a continuation of the previous story, Frontier in Space. Always somehow get these two confused. So it's weird that I hardly ever get confused between the Seeds of Death and the Seeds of Doom, but for some reason Frontier in Space and Colony in Space is the one that always trips me up. Anywho, we're not here to talk about either of all those episodes. We're here to talk about Planet of the Daleks, and I really like that one. It's again, the Third Doctor era. He's not my favorite Doctor, but I can hardly find a bad episode in all 5 seasons of the Jon Pertwee era. It's just that era is just Doctor Who perfection. There's still stories I like better than some of the stories in this season, but it's hard to find a flaw in this era, unlike most other Doctors. But that being said, so we're starting off pretty much picking up where the previous episode left up. As a matter of fact, in the middle of last episode, we see the Doctor still sprawled on the floor after being shot by I think it was either the Master or one of the Ogrons. It was an Ogron weapon, I believe. But so the Doctor was on the floor, bleeding, badly injured. He needed to get back to the TARDIS. He uses the TARDIS's telepathic circuits to ask for help from the Time Lords to follow the Daleks. And this is kind of where I think I'd find a huge gaping flaw in this episode, is that the Daleks that we're following are completely different from the Daleks in the previous episode. Like, there's a different squad of Daleks, different ship. We see the Golden Dalek there. Doesn't turn up in this episode, though. And I don't know, for some reason I kind of get the feeling that it's a completely different point in time and space on the Dalek timeline. It doesn't seem, other than the opening segment, it doesn't seem like a complete continuation of the Frontier in Space story. It's a completely different Dalek invasion force, probably for even a completely different century. But I mean, that's just the way I feel. Maybe there's some connective stories in between that actually established that no, this is a direct follow-up, but it just feels like a completely different story that almost completely detached from the previous one, minus the opening. And the opening, it's nice we get to see more of the TARDIS. I like that. There's the huge wall of drawers that we never saw before or since this episode. That's pretty funny. I like the pull away bed, the stretcher bed that the Doctor lies on for a bit. And this segment of the episode actually kind of addresses something that's rarely talked about in Doctor Who. The Doctor basically has a healing factor. I'm not saying it's like a Wolverine or a Deadpool type, where he can literally regrow his entire body from severed limbs. I mean, why even go that far? Captain Jack also did it. I mean, yes, he did regrow another hand after it was cut off, but those were completely different circumstances. So the Doctor, at least as long as he's in the TARDIS, can basically heal himself over time. And there's a method that the Doctor uses in the next season where he just shuts his brain off and sort of starts to heal off that way. So maybe that's something similar to what he did in this episode. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it even more, that's also something similar to what he did in his first episode, Terror of the Autons. You know, after he got shot, basically shot himself down deliberately. Was self-induced coma, I believe the medical doctor said in that episode. The Doctor basically can heal himself over time if necessary. So that's neat. And about the next part, I'm normally one of the biggest cheerleaders for Joe Grant. I think she's a marvelous companion. She's my favorite Third Doctor companion. Sarah Jane Smith is my all-time favorite for any Doctor ever, but for the Third Doctor specifically, Jo Grant is my favorite. She kind of does a lot of stupid stuff every once in a while. And I kind of think that choosing to leave the TARDIS, not knowing where she landed or if the planet is even safe, I don't think that was a good idea. But I understand the situation she was in. She kind of had no choice. And, you know, it leads us into planet Spyridon. That is a planet I definitely wish they'd explored more of in the Doctor Who universe, because that is it's another. Terry Nation is back. We basically in this season we went from Bob Baker and Dave Martin to Robert Holmes to Malcolm Hulke to Terry frickin' Nation. I believe this is the first Terry Nation story in a while. I can't remember if he also wrote Day of the Daleks, but this definitely it's been a while since we've got the creativity of the mind of Terry Nation, and he just has a natural touch for planets. Like any planet designed and devised by Terry Nation feels like a lived-in world with an entire ecosystem and plants. I mean, you got plants that spray liquid on their prey that then turns into fungus and suffocates them. You got these little plants with little eyeballs that zoom around trying to locate any threats. And of course, the Spyridons themselves, they're invisible, which of course saves a lot on the budget. You don't have to design a new alien, but also, it allows for the creativity of just, instead of just designing the big humanoid alien, let the people's imagination do the majority of the work, and just have the guys carry around these heavy fur coats and walk around with them. And that's how you design an alien. I love that. I mean, it's definitely, you can kind of tell at times that Terry Nation is writing some of these scripts specifically for a TV show without a lot of budget. Hence, the imagination is where the show shines, and then the creativity, and that's really where the script shines. That's why Terry Nation is one of the best Doctor Who screenwriters of all time. This also doesn't just bring us back the Daleks, we also get the Thals back. And I love seeing the Thals. It's another thing I wish we got to see more of the Thals in classic Doctor Who. I mean, the Thals are an integral part of the Daleks' history that no one really talks about anymore. I mean, barely anyone talks about the Khalids anymore. These were mostly prominent for the classic series, but I mean, if you're just watching the modern series, you have no idea who the Thals are, who the Khalids are. It's a complete mystery to you. You probably know who Davros is, but you don't even know what his species was before Daleks. And that's even several episodes away from this one. So again, I wish we got to see more of the Thals and the Khalids in a classic Doctor Who, and even modern Doctor Who. Options still on the table as far as I'm concerned with this new era with Russell T Davies. But it's kind of nice to see Bernard Horsfall. I hope I'm pronouncing the guy's name right. Back at it in Doctor Who. I mean, the guy basically acted alongside 3 or 4 Doctors in a way, because he was there on in The Mind Robber. He played Gulliver. He played one of the Time Lords from the Doctor's trial, in the second Doctor's trial in the War Games, which of course was later revealed to be the same Time Lord from the 4th Doctor story, The Deadly Assassin, Goth. And he was in this episode as a Thal, which is really cool. So yeah, the guy definitely made his mark on Doctor Who in more ways than one. I actually really like some of the other Thals in the story. You can definitely tell it. Each Thal is unique. Like in the first story to feature the Thals, the Daleks, way back in 1963/1964. Some of those Thals kind of felt a little bland. Like you couldn't tell one from the other. This episode, with the exception of a couple that kind of get killed off pretty quickly, pretty much every single Thal was unique and individual. They had their own personality. There's even some personal stories between the head Thal from Bernard Horsfeld. What was his name? I apologize, I can't remember, but it was him and Rebek, I think is the name of the female Thal we get to see in this episode. So yeah, there's definitely some story there. Some stuff left on the table. Maybe the novelization of the episode expands a bit on it a bit more. Again, that there's more story to be told about the leader of the expedition who was killed prior to the events of the episode, and some civil unrest on Skaro right now with all these space missions. And I think it's the first mention of Thals actually leaving the planet Skaro. I mean, it's already known fact at this point that the Daleks are leaving Skaro, but the Thals are doing it as well. So that's pretty cool. And I love that they reference the Doctor's first story. Remember, by this point, it's been 10, 11 years since that story with the first Doctor, Ian and Barbara and Susan. So I guess it makes sense that they're feeling nostalgic. I mean, we just had a few episodes ago, we had the 3 Doctors. So the show's kind of getting nostalgic. It's gotten to the point where the show can reference previous stories from itself and to offer sort of a sense of continuity. And I really like that. And I really like that the Thal offered Jo Grant to stay behind with him and go back to Skaro with him. And it's nice to see that she was at least considering it. And that even the Doctor was considering letting her leave, but in the end she didn't. That is called foreshadowing, ladies and gentlemen, because the next story she leaves, but it's kind of funny to imagine what life would have been like if, or rather what the franchise would have looked like if Jo went back to Skaro with the Thal character. That would have been interesting. I mean, obviously she would have fit in perfectly. She's got the blonde hair. That's all we really need to fit in well in the Society of Thals. But yeah, so probably she wouldn't have married Cliff Jones, didn't have all these children and grandchildren, probably wouldn't have showed up for the Doctor's funeral in the Sarah Jane Adventures. There's a completely whole other life she could have had she done that. And I think it's sort of indicative of the classic series' way of saying that anything can happen with these companions. They could be dropped off anywhere. They can leave at any point in time and space, and it's only just a matter of question where and when these companions would leave. Because obviously, naturally, back then there was a little less certainty with the fates of some of these characters. It's not like in these days where we kind of basically know when every single character is going to leave, because actors have contracts and there's publicity stuff, and we know when certain actors leave the show. So yeah, it's kind of interesting it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. As for the story in and of itself as a Dalek story, I think it's really good. I mean, invisible Daleks? Give me that all day long. Well, what's scarier than that? I mean, the Daleks are already terrifying enough on their own. Imagine if they could turn invisible. You would not see them coming. They could take over the entire universe and you wouldn't know it. Like, imagine millions upon billions of people being slaughtered by the Daleks, and you're not going to see them coming. Thankfully, it was a bit unsuccessful for them. I mean, they kind of killed them after a while, after a fashion. But I mean, they were very close. They were on the brink of developing that, and just the idea of the 10,000 Daleks frozen underneath the city of the main city in Spyridon. That's terrifying. Imagine that army being able to turn invisible let loose on the universe. And also, I kind of like the image of all those Daleks. I call it the Dalekata Army. Get it? Because it's kind of like the Terracotta Army, but with Daleks. I think it's funny. Anyways, so yeah, there's a lot of different threats for this episode, for the Doctor and friend to face in this episode. Not just the invisible Daleks, but the Spyrodons themselves, who, yes, they are being subjugated, but they're also, that doesn't mean that they're not against them. I mean, they still would attack if necessary, and they do. In this episode, there's the wonderful budget saving moment in the what was it, the circle of stones. First of all, a great idea. The stones absorb the sunlight, the heat from the sun during the day and expel it during the night. Genius planet building. But yeah, again, they're just sitting there trying to keep warm, and you see a bunch of eyes. Again, this saves up a lot of money on designing creatures, just showing the eyes and letting your mind run wild. It's a product of its time. I kind of wish we got to see what these creatures look like. You know, that's the kind of person I am. I was never really a big fan of the whole not showing the monster. I mean, if you're gonna terrify me, show me the freaking monster. If I'm not seeing a monster, it's not scary to me. But that's just me. That's just the kind of person I am. So yeah, there's that great moment. Now, here's a bit of a nitpick. Well, a couple of nitpicks I have to say about this episode. The Doctor and the other Thal scientists escaped their cell kind of the same way that the Doctor already did it in the Daleks episode from 1963. And of course, there's a lot of references to that episode, but I mean, some of it's a bit more on the nose than others. I mean, they basically they're waiting for the Dalek to come in. They shut him down, and then they escape. The whole tunnel system with the elevator. There's a lot more to explore in the city. I'll admit, but it kind of feels a bit the same. And even just, you know, opening up a Dalek and putting someone inside it. You know, taking the Dalek mutant out and putting someone inside it and doing the whole Wookiee prisoner gag, as it's commonly known these days, feels a little bit cheap. I mean, it's already been done in the Daleks debut story, but it's still a great tactic, and I think it's nice. I like that. The other main nitpick I have for this episode is that after they discover the invisible Daleks, the invisible Dalek, singular, I should say, they try to open it up. The Doctor says, no, don't do that. Every Dalek has a distress signal. If you open it, it could activate. First of all, when has that been established? That's new. When the Doctor had time to learn about it. And second of all, they do it to the other Daleks later in the same serial, and that whole plot point just gets completely dropped. Like, it's not even mentioned. And that's kind of weird. That's a bit of a nitpick, problem in continuity, in my opinion. But whatever. I mean, it gets us through the plot, so there really isn't much to complain about that. I will say that one of the genius ideas from this episode is the liquid ice. I love that. Again, you can tell it is a Terry Nation planet, because the guy really just thinks of everything. So the core of the planet, presumably, the core of the planet is molten ice in liquid form that comes out from these ice geysers. That's awesome. That's cool. I like that. I love ideas like that. And I think to wrap this whole thing up in one neat little bow, we got to talk about one of my personal favorite things that this episode introduces: the Supreme Dalek. We're finally getting some more details about the Dalek hierarchy. We got the Supreme. We know that there's a Supreme Council, and we know that there's the Supreme Dalek, second only to the Emperor, and he's basically the Darth Vader of the Daleks. He's the enforcer. He's the Dalek that other Daleks fear. He's the Dalek above all others you do not want to mess with. I just love the design of the guy. I mean, he gets his own entrance theme. I mean, you know a character is important when he gets his own theme, when he enters a room. Like when he rolls down, it's like, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da-da. I mean, that's a Vader moment. That's Vader crossing the hangar at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, and all the other officers standing in attention, and the whole moment of Lord Vader. This is an unexpected pleasure. We are honored by your presence. That's sort of a thing. And what does he do? How does he establish the dominance? First of all, when he speaks, no one moves. When he talks, no one moves. And of course, you know, how do you establish that a Dalek is above all the rest? First of all, the light bulbs that flash when he talks are bigger, and also the little flashlight, which is very clearly a flashlight. I mean, I don't have any delusions on that part, but the little flashlight at the front also flashes when he speaks. Then he turns to the Dalek in charge, and he's like, "You failed. The Supreme Council does not tolerate failure," and he just shoots him. That is how a Dalek establishes dominance. That is how you know he is the Supreme Dalek. It's a shame they never really brought him back. At least not this particular model, this particular version of the Supreme Dalek. I mean, I'm grateful for anytime we get to see the Supreme Dalek in the modern series. You know, the red one with the three golden things on the side there. But I mean, the Supreme Dalek is a model I wish we got to see more of in the classic series and the modern series. Maybe they'll bring it back when they eventually bring back the Daleks again for the Shudigatwa stuff. But yeah, and also you know, the message at the end. First of all, what great chutzpah from the Thals. I mean, both their spaceships are gone. So what do? They steal the Dalek spaceship and leave the Daleks marooned on the planet with their 10,000 Dalekata army buried under liquid ice. And the Supreme Dalek makes a note to point out that this is only a setback. They'll rise up again and crawl out of this mess, and they will eventually achieve their ultimate goal, which they never did in the TV show side of things. But it's still an interesting speech to end the episode on. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have for this episode. A lot to unpack with this episode, but I think I did a pretty good job explaining that. And yeah, I really like this episode. One of my favorite Dalek stories, and it's great to see Terror Nation back. So, yep, that's it for now. Let me know what you think about this episode, and I'll see you some other time. Goodbye. Hi there. Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.